Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Wil, one of the hardest parts of being a founder is building the company while realizing that you're not fully in sync, lockstep, synchronicity with the people around you. And, we hear people say things like, build alignment. They forget to tell you in the brochure is that alignment is largely fictional. And of course, we love to imagine that we're all on the same team. But ever watch the ship take on water? It becomes really apparent who has a life vest and who doesn't,
Who goes down with the ship
super fast. And so after decades of trying to force alignment, I think I've realized it's less about syncing goals and more about managing fundamentally misaligned expectations.
Yeah, and foundations, right?
I guess the big question is, are we really aligned with everyone around us, our employees, co-founders, even our spouses, right? Are we?
Right. You and I did a whole episode on this as it related to investors, because investors love to say, we're going to be on the same side of the table and we're aligned. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not even remotely
They're cheating
aligned.
because they mean that. But it's a round table, Wil. So it's not fair. It's a round table. So just by definition, we're all on the same side.
Yeah,
of the table.
right,
That's
right. And I just think about it, I thought that argument was so hollow, and it sounds cool, but it's just so incredibly untrue.
Yeah.
But with this episode, I think we need to go beyond the investors, because this same fake alignment problem where we want to be aligned, but we're just not, is, as you said, as much of a problem with co-founders, with employees, with spouses. And I think we should talk about spouses too, because they're like the unsung hero or villain, depending on how your relationship goes.
They're an ever-present high leverage personality in all of this, right?
Yeah, Ryan, I've never thought about it like that. A high leverage personality. That's absolutely true. That's really well put.
That'll be the last time I say something that smart today. So
yeah, we're all done. Thank you. Thank everybody for being part of the Startup Therapy Podcast.
That's a wrap.
And I'm done. So let me say this. I struggled with this concept of alignment for decades, because I wanted to believe, and I think a lot of other people do too. I wanted to believe optimistically that I could have this symbiotic, perfect alignment with all the people in my life. And, and if that alignment didn't exist, it was just some sort of Lego piece I was missing to complete the set, right? It never occurred to me, it does now, that the alignment was so far off to begin with that crossing that chasm, it was way harder than I thought it would be. And again, I think today, as we unpack why those chasms are so significant, even in stuff like co-founders, where you're supposed to be in the same place, I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's another one of these things. I seem to keep echoing this, but it's one of those things that starts at that really early stage, and then we carry it forward, in a lot of cases unnecessarily. I realized at some point that one of the reasons I was looking for that alignment, the reason I wanted it so desperately to be aligned, was that at the early stage of a startup, very little is working, right? And so it was almost as if, as long as everybody else was aligned with me, as long as everybody else sort of felt like what I was doing was the right thing, it was some form of another, a validation, or maybe it was just even as simple as if everybody else could have the rose-colored glasses on, I could keep swimming through the mire, right? Just somehow I needed that alignment psychologically, less actually from a practical standpoint. I didn't actually need them to do anything, right? I don't need my spouse to be aligned with me so that I can go do the thing I have to do, or that she can do the thing that she needs to do. I just wanted it to be. I wanted it to be so that I could feel good about going and doing what I had to do. It wasn't fundamentally going to stop me from doing it, and yet it can.
It also feels a lot different when it's not aligned, right? There's one thing where I don't need all of your support, but getting negative support where you're actually tearing me down, it's definitely a problem. Ryan, I'm going to rewind back circa 2012, 2013, somewhere in that era, okay?
Deep in the archives.
Deep in the archives. And you and I are just starting to hire this new entrant to the workforce called millennials. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, and again, I hate when people do this like generational class warfare, etc. But and I know a lot of our audience are millennials, so bear with me when I say this, right? Ryan and I are in the Gen X category. None of this matters. I'm just pointing out this was our first time, in our 30s, hiring a generation that wasn't us.
Right. They were just entering, right? There was finally, they were now of legal age to hire. And so we started doing so, right? Yeah.
And so this was the first time in my generation, Ryan, and I remember having these conversations with you, where a new generation comes to work and they brought this new concept that we had never heard of before called work-life balance. And what work-life balance means is I don't want to work as much. I've never heard someone introduce work-life balance that also includes
Right.
because I want to work more, right?
Right. Can you
But
lighten my life a little so I can put more weight on the work side, please?
exactly, right? So anyway, that's here nor there. Point is, we start hiring a bunch of millennials, and by millennials, I just mean like 22-year-olds at the time. Okay,
Yep. At the time, that
at
was
the
it.
time, they're in 40s now, but at the time, they'd come to work, they were fine, right? All good, all green light signals. But the craziest thing happened at 6 o'clock, which we started. We worked 9 to 6. At 6 o'clock, everyone would pack their laptops and just all at once
Just
leave.
like, yeah,
And you could
lemmings.
separate without having to say a word who is Gen X and who is millennial, right? Because the
Right. You
millennials,
were
like
still sitting. You
clockwork,
were Gen X. If you
yeah,
were,
exactly. No one said a word, right? Like no one had
no,
to say a thing.
nope.
But the reason I bring this up is it was the first time that I had ever seen such a dramatic distinction between my vision of
Yeah.
alignment and their vision of alignment. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I leaned in naturally and I asked some folks, I was like, so, you're leaving at 6 is like a half day. I mean, I'm kidding, but like,
Right.
that's kind of like, and they were like, yeah, that's because I'm an employee. I'm not the owner. They said
Yep.
this in so many words, but it was the first time I'd ever heard someone verbalize that. And I was like, huh,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not wrong.
Yeah. You've got a point. I
Yeah.
don't like that it's pointed at me, but you've got a point, right? Like I don't get to leave the movie halfway. I have to stick until the credits roll, right? Like, why do you get to leave?
It didn't occur to me that our
Yeah.
incentives were different. Like, up
Yeah.
until that point, I had never had to have that conversation, and, what I'm saying is just and there's nothing wrong with what they did, my point is that they did it, and
Right.
it forced me to realize that we're not in alignment.
No.
Prior to that, I'm not even kidding, for, like 15 years, I would work until midnight with my entire team, and now
Yeah.
mind you, we're all younger, but so are they, right? Like,
Right.
and no one would think twice about it. There's a guy out of Santa Monica named Jason Nazar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jason started docstock.com, and
Yep.
then damn, I just blanked on the second company he started. I think he sold them both. And I remember one time I was in Santa Monica. That's when I was living there. And Jason's like, "Hey, let's grab some dinner." We got to dinner. It's like 9 o'clock, a little bit late for a dinner. And after dinner, he's like, I gotta head back to the office. I'm like, "Oh, did you leave something?" He's like, "No, we're still working." I
We're
go
still
just
working.
just
Yeah.
because I had to see this and we were walking
Uh-huh.
past his
I want to
office
go. I want to
anyway.
go see what this looks like.
Right?
Yeah.
I go in, Ryan, his entire team was there.
Yeah.
Like no different than when I'd stop by at like 3 in the afternoon, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying this is healthy or good.
No,
I'm
no, no.
saying somehow
But
he had aligned his interests in like his interest of being a founder with their interest of
their
wanting or
interests.
maybe having to be there.
Yeah.
But now I can't even fathom that. Like I don't even pretend like those interests are aligned.
No, and I think that was part of the challenge, right? Is that early on, right? I used to expect my staff to be as all in as me, and anyone around me. And it was participating in anything with me. I always expected everybody else to be as in as me. I told the
Yep.
story once about getting dressed down by my coach after trying to push the team too hard, and basically having him explain exactly this to me. He's like, look, the consequences aren't the same for everybody. Not everybody wants the same things out of this that you do. Not everyone's going to get the same things out of this that you do. Therefore, you can't expect them to put the same things into this as you do. Right. So me expecting everyone to be as all in as I wasn't fair. Wasn't fair for the team. Wasn't fair for my staff later. They didn't sign up for what I'm just going to say my level of consequence.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
In either direction. Right. If it goes really well, it will go better for me. If it goes really poorly, it will go a lot more poorly for me, right? The
Yeah,
way
well,
we are, it's funny. You can kind of think of it as like a pendulum. We are way out at the very far reaches of the pendulum. So when it swings, we swing all the way. They're somewhere down near the bottom. So yeah, it goes back and forth. But it's like being on deck versus being in the crow's nest. We're in the crow's nest, right? So when the ship tilts, we go all the way. And I think that once you realize that and you stop expecting that alignment, it got a little easier. I'm not going to say it got easy. It was still hugely frustrating for me, but it got easier.
yeah. Okay. So stick with that then. So I think my challenge, and I think a lot of others, is, hey, we're all in this together. We're all going to build something great. And it's like, yeah, sort of. Actually, I'll
Yeah.
give you another interesting point about this concept of ownership, if you will. And I'm not talking about equity. I just mean like ownership of what you're building. Okay. Like just like genuine passion for what it is. This concept of not my baby. And by the way, not my baby does not mean that I wasn't the person that started it. But what I'm saying is
Right.
there are folks in like you and Gak and folks like that that have full ownership of what's here, right? Like
Yeah.
you've been there from the start. You've built this thing. This thing is a part of
Yep.
your DNA, but it stops there too. The other people that are in after don't have that like
Don't
it's
have
my
it.
baby too
Yeah.
kind of DNA.
Yep.
And for a long time, I just assumed if you were on payroll, you had that DNA.
Right. No, it's not it. You know, it's interesting because I think that, some of it is that ownership, and there's a particular type of ownership that I'm gonna call out here because I think that commitment gap isn't necessarily about loyalty, right?
Right. Yeah,
It's
I
it's
agree with
about
that totally.
it's the ownership is about the risk. It's about who owns the risk in a lot of cases,
Yep.
right? Who actually owns the downside of this thing, because that is going to really and truly determine how committed someone is. Now, I think you're talking about a different type of ownership, which is also extremely valid, which is just having been and built and been part of it. And literally it's part of your DNA, you're part of its DNA, right? Like you pull this out and like that's now it's no longer the same company. That's a different aspect, but equally as important.
Well, my frustrations have been going in these conversations with an expectation that they saw things the way I did. And again, the
Yeah.
consequence was a big one.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. Like 10 years ago, I remember you, me, and a couple of other leadership were on a chat. This was on a Saturday. And something
Okay.
was going wrong with something. Maybe like our ads weren't firing or something. Like there was
Yep.
some like issue. And I remember like chatting with all of you, particularly, one of the folks in the group was like, "Hey guys, honestly, this is like a weekend, I want to be off on the weekends. I don't want to do that." In my response, in so many words, but not these words, I'm just trying to
Okay.
like paraphrase, was if that's your response, you shouldn't be on this chat. Right? Meaning like you shouldn't be in leadership. The point of leadership is that you do have to take
You
these
are tied to
calls.
these consequences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like you don't
When
get to
this
call
level
off.
of shit, like it wasn't like we were like, hey guys, what do you think? Should we plan the Christmas party for the 15th or the 18th? It's like, hey, there's a fundamental challenge. Like we're taking on water.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
got to
We're
show up
taking
for
on
that.
water. Yeah, and so, but again, it's back to that reframing. So now what I've come to realize, and again, you'll start to see this theme permeate through everything we're about to talk about. What I've started to realize is I have to be super honest about what those differences are. If we can't make payroll, they will lose their job, and there's nothing inconsequential about that. That's meaningful, right? Those are people's
Correct.
lives. But if I can't make payroll, I lose everything. I lose
Everything. Yep.
everybody's jobs, right? I lose
Yep.
my own job. I put myself into personal risk. Like, I can't just quit and restart. To your
Right.
point, everyone else has some version of a life raft. I'm going down with this thing to the bottom of the ocean.
Yep.
So, yes, I'm freaking out about it on a Saturday. There's a reason someone else isn't. And I need to check myself before I have that reaction.
For sure. And I think like as time goes on, one of the things that I've realized, particularly within the employee sec, I don't need everyone to agree. I don't need everyone to have the same level of commitment or consequence. It's about them showing up, right? It's not about everyone agreeing.
Yeah.
It's about everybody still showing up, right? It's about
Yep.
being there, doing the thing that I need, and me being very clear on kind of what I need and letting them be very clear on what I need from them.
Sure.
But it is still frustrating. And it's funny. I do believe that part of this comes from a really good place, which
How do
is
you mean?
just like we're seeking out that. So like this desire for alignment, particularly amongst the team. Forget the spouses for a minute. Forget the people who aren't directly like in this, like literally turning the screws and the bolts and building the machine with us. I think part of that is this sort of like desire for camaraderie, this desire to feel like everyone cares enough to really want to do this for all the right reasons. So again, I think part of this does come from a good place. This isn't me saying like I need everyone aligned so that we can get things done and grow faster and make more money. Yes, that is one of the byproducts, but I think for me it was just always about like it always felt good, right? It
Okay.
was like you ever pull like a study all nighter, right? Where everybody's like, let's ace this exam. Okay, well, that was the thing that used to happen. Or just let's stay up until this thing ships, but like at that level where it wasn't out of some sense of obligation, it was a sense of desire and pride that happened at an individual level, but that culminated in a group of people doing something pretty awesome together. And I think that like part of me will always want to recreate that.
Right.
Part of me will always want
Right.
to say like, let's do stay at the office till midnight. And then I'll look at labor laws and go, yeah, let's maybe not.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so let's take that off the table though. Let's move up the chain to a co-founder. Okay. And here's someone, let's say you have 50-50 stock, like, we're taking off the, hey, you have more than I do kind of thing. And so at that point, like, well, then we're definitely aligned, right?
Yeah.
Because we have the same amount of stock, upside, downside is the same. Let's assume every dollar in, dollar out is the same. And I'm like, yeah, no, you don't. On paper, those should align, but that's actually not what creates co-founder disputes more often. It's an expectation.
It's being in the same boat and looking at different maps.
Yep.
Right.
That's a cool way to look at it.
Like it's super frustrating, right?
Yeah.
And for both sides, clearly, right? Except when like you and I, we're always the ones that are right about it. And so then like it's more frustrating for us because it was their misalignment.
I was like, okay, so here's what I would say. The thing that I've seen the most is an expectation of contribution. Ryan, you and I are 50-50 co-founders on something, and we both have an expectation about how contribution is going to work. And here's a couple places it backfires. And using you and I as a metaphor for like every co-founder. The first place it backfires is, number one, everyone thinks they work harder than they do. We did a whole episode about this, right? Talking about like people's perception of how hard they work. So like I come home to my spouse, I'm like, oh my God, what a long day. And my spouse just assumes that must mean that I've done all this effort. Right. But I could have worked for 2 freaking hours, but I could have professionally complained about it when I come home. Right. Or in my mind, I quote, worked really hard. I mean, Ryan, you and I both dealt with this. In fact, I think we've done podcasts about this. I've had days where I felt like I've just gone through a slog all day and have nothing to show for it.
Nothing to show for it. Yeah.
Some people, that's their career. They're busy being busy. And in their mind, like, I worked hard, but you didn't get anything done. Right? Like, yes, you spent time in a place. That doesn't mean you had output.
It's got to come down to transformation, right? Something has to have changed based on what you did, and hopefully positive transformation, not just something changed.
Ryan, you ever play a soccer game where you worked really hard, but you didn't score any points?
Yeah, most of them. And I'm not the goalie, right?
Yeah, I was going to say. but same thing. And so my point is, that's usually where it starts, this misalignment, is that our expectations about our output and someone else's output don't align. So it's like, I'm doing everything right and they're fucking everything up. Okay. So that's one part. But another part, I'm just going to give you the 2 categories. Let's kind of, build into a little bit. But the other part is an expectation on how this company should be run. And that has so many tentacles. That's everything from how our culture should be, to whether we take on money, to whether do we pull out cash now or do we reinvest it for the future, or to what our product's going to be, you name it, right? And those expectations can become so dissimilar that our alignment is damn near impossible, even though on paper we should be on the same side of the table.
I think that's the bigger one for me, because I really do feel like when the friction isn't about effort, meaning like what are our actual daily contributions, because to your point, everybody's going to have a different view on that anyways, right? Like the way I feel about what I did today may or may not be accurate. So the way you feel about what I did today, probably even less accurate, right? It's third party. So it's like, it's super tough. But when the friction isn't about effort, when it becomes about direction, right? The fundamentals of how we're running the business, who we're running it with, who are our clients going to be, who are our staff going to be, all of these little things that are so involved in whether the company works or not, or how well it works, or how well we enjoy how it's working. That was what I meant before when I said same boat, different maps, right? Even if we're putting in the same amount of effort, let's say we do get that to parity, like just every day, somehow magically we hit exactly the same level of effort. We're both rowing exactly the same speed. Turns out we're rowing different directions. We're going nowhere. Right? To me, that's the most critical misalignment between co-founders. And I think it's the harder one to diagnose, because what people will tend to look at is the other person's output, and they'll go whether it's either working or not. What they don't look at in most cases is that working towards the thing I am working towards as well? Like, are we even pointed in the same direction? If I can quantify their effort and that's all I looked at, like, good, Will went 60 miles an hour, I went 60 miles an hour. Right. Too damn bad we went opposite directions, right? That's not good. But I think that's the part people fail to look at, right? That's the part people fail to analyze.
Something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it. Okay, so when we think about that and we're like, hey, shit, I really don't have the same type of alignment as my co-founder, again, I think this is the recurring theme I was talking about. The first thing is to recognize that, right? To be able to say, I want to be on the same page. Of course I want a page, but I'm not, right? Like, I don't believe they work hard, or I don't believe that we should raise VC, or I don't believe this product is, ever going to work. Like, you have to be really honest about the fact that you are not on board with alignment before you try to force this alignment. I see this, and we'll get to couples and relationships in a second, but like, I see this in relationships all the time, where you got two people, like somebody and their spouse, and they can't reconcile because at the end of the day, they just don't agree, right? And they're like, we want to have a happy relationship, marriage, whatever it is, and I'm like, you're not going to. You fundamentally don't agree. Like, your foundation is broken, and that's what we're talking about here with co-founders. Which the mirror between co-founders and spouses is so freaking tight because it is that kind of symbiotic relationship, and I think it's hard to get right.
The person you spend the other part of your waking hours with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's your daytime spouse.
I think one of the challenges, I'm going to go back to what I said near the top of the episode, which is so many of these things come from the early days and just get perpetuated. Now, this one's a bit different because it's an inverse curve. I think at the beginning, co-founder alignment is actually very good because there's damn near nothing to misalign on, right? You're like, do you think this is a crazy idea that has almost no chances of succeeding and we should just try it? Yeah, right. That's all there was to think about, right? There's nothing
There's no consequence
there yet. And I think that's one of the big challenges with this is that founders miss the opportunities or don't take the opportunities to reassess that on an ongoing basis. I mean, talk about something that needs real-time monitoring. It is co-founder alignment because it's something that by just nature of how a startup builds, it erodes or grows further apart as time passes by virtue of growing the business. In some ways, your success is what will drive you apart. I don't mean that like success necessarily has to, but just by getting bigger and having more dynamism in the startup, you are inherently driving more variability, more opportunities for us to be misaligned and go different directions. Do you ever see this get caught in time? I'm trying to think of like, have I seen like founders catch this in time? I feel like there's like two types of founders. The ones that are like, they were just measuring it and they're constantly talking and doing it. And there's the ones that get to like the cataclysm and they're like, holy shit, I don't even recognize you anymore. Let's try to figure this out.
I think everybody waits till it's too late because no one, this is the whole point of this episode is no one anticipates why it would be a problem to begin with. Again, we go in this with the, we're 50-50 partners. So I guess everything is settled. It's like that's the least of your concerns. Best case, that's settled. Worst case is even that's a problem. But as we're talking about this, as we're talking about relationships, let's take this over to spouses because I think we're going to see a lot of parallels here. But what I would say, and we said this at the top of the episode, spouses are like the co-founders no one talks about. For every founder, there is someone at home, and we say spouse, it could be whatever your version at home is, your emotional support that isn't your direct coworker type thing, right? But let's just use spouses here for a second. One of the things that we don't consider when we go into this is whether or not our spouses are really on board with this. And I'll give you a very common example. Common example is I'll use my own wife. Sarah just cares about two things: safety and security, which are kind of the same thing, right? She does not want to rock the boat. Her answer to everything is, what's the safest answer? And that's already my answer before you even giving me my options. Now, the irony here that she married a guy who has done nothing but roll the dice his entire life.
Opposites attract.
Yeah, exactly. True, it's unbelievable. And when when we met each other, when we got married, I was already like 10 years in my career as an entrepreneur, and I was all in entrepreneurs. Clearly, I was never going to have a day job, so to speak. So she knew what she was signing up for, but it hasn't changed her approach. She's not like, well, we've married 14 years. Like, it's not like Sarah now is like, oh, well, screw it, let's roll the dice. Her answer is no different now than it was 14 years ago the day we got married. When you look at this with Nargis, as she considers how dynamic what you do is and always have been, how does she relate to it? Are you guys aligned on startup?
No, we're aligned in that this is what we're doing. Are we aligned in terms of how we tolerate the pain of it? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's easy when it's working well, right? It always is.
I was just going to say the same thing. Right.
I think that's an important thing to think about. And this goes for co-founders. This goes for spouses, your person, whoever that is, whatever that might be. With co-founders, we're dividing equity. With spouses, we're not necessarily. I mean, under certain legal circumstances, sure, you're also dividing your equity with them, but you are dividing pain.
Yeah.
right? The tolerance of pain when things aren't going well, right? So
Yep.
when it's going great, yeah, easy,
Yeah. Who
right?
cares?
It's
Not a problem.
easy to share the good times. When we're in the other 95% of running a startup, it's not just about dividing the pain. It's about the fact that even if we were to divide the pain equally, pain tolerance isn't equal, right? Rarely are we able to tolerate the pain in the same ways. And I think that that's one of the things that we see. I think that even the degree that my wife and I are aligned, Nargis's tolerance for pain around a specific kind of way, anything that's a threat to stability. So very much like Sarah, anything that's a threat to stability, safety and security for our family is going to have very little tolerance, right? That gets a yelp really quick. And this is from a woman who did 3 natural childbirths. So she doesn't yelp easy, right? So like she can tolerate some pain, but there are particular types of pain that she is extremely susceptible to. And that's one of them. And I think that was one of the things that I started to realize is like, to me, the startup is so closely tied to my identity. And to her, it's not, right? It's just an existential threat to stability in a lot of ways. Yep. Now, it also does provide, it also does a lot of other things. It does some wonderful things too. But I think that there is always this sense that it is very much a sword that cuts both ways, and that there's a very, very strong fear around it cutting that direction.
One of the things that's been really successful for me with my wife has been repeating out loud what our differences are. Okay.
Yeah.
And let me explain. And not to be confrontational, to be reassuring. So when we're doing something, I'm always, you've been in this adventure for me for a long time. I'm always doing something friggin' weird. When I tell her about it, right?
Not inaccurate.
Yeah. When I tell her about it, she's like, huh, well, that's an idea.
Yeah. that's you had a thought.
It's something you could do. All right. Please don't tell me you've already done it. And
yeah.
So, yeah. but
did you say theoretically?
Yeah,
please?
exactly. So
yeah.
Here's what I always open up with. I always say, look, while we have shared goals in life, as a family,
sure.
I understand that some of these goals are just my goals. You mentioned it a second ago. You talked about kind of like your ownership in the outcome,
yep.
your identity. Those are things that are important to you and I, but they don't necessarily matter to our wives, right? Like, here's an example. Ryan, if you and I service 1 million founders or 10 million founders, we're going to have some sort of reaction to it. Okay. Like there's something that's going to spark something inside us, everything from pride to reassurance to you name it, right? Like all these good emotions. My wife doesn't give a shit, nor should she, by the way, right? She wouldn't even know.
It's the same. Oh, wow. Whether it's 10, 100, a billion.
She has no context for it. Yeah. And again, nor should she. But this is my point.
Why would she?
Whenever we go down one of these paths, when we're having these discussions, I always like kind of zoom out and I say, look, I understand that my goals and my aspirations are different than yours. Now, hopefully the results of my aspirations help with your aspirations, right?
Yeah.
But they're not the same. So it's not fair for me to say, well, why don't you just back me up? Because our goals aren't the same, right? Like I'm trying to do dumb shit in hopes that it will make money, which will help our family. But there's a lot of ways to make money that are a lot more safe than what I'm going to go do. And I'm choosing not to do them. So by default, we're not aligned. And when she hears that, it doesn't mean she instantly agrees with me, but I think it goes for miles to hear that someone understands why you're not aligned.
As we're saying this now, I'm wondering if I mean, clearly we've sort of said that like hoping for alignment might be part of the problem in the beginning, because when we start to talk about misalignment, I'm not even sure that's fair, right? Because we aren't necessarily misaligned. Misaligned suggests that we were supposed to be on the exact same axis.
Yeah, right.
And that somehow we veered off. The word that's springing to mind now for me is asymmetry. Asymmetry acknowledges that we're operating on different planes entirely, right? Like where you and I are operating versus where our spouses are operating, right? Where there are some common goals, we are doing things on entirely different planes, different vectors, right? Yep. Again, maybe a shared outcome, keep family alive. The way you and I are doing that and the way they're doing that, completely different things.
Absolutely.
It's different stakes, different consequences, different time horizons too, right? Because there are decisions you and I are making that have like these, in our own minds, these far-reaching consequences. Like I'm going to start doing this thing now that maybe will pay off long time down the road.
Right.
And they're like, how do we manage, children today? How do we manage the safety of the family today? They're also thinking long-term as well. I also think the other problem with misalignment, just as a concept, now that I'm thinking through it, is that somehow it implies it can be fixed with better communication or realignment. Whereas asymmetry says, this is structural. This is literally how this thing was built, and it's going to stay this way. All we can do is sort of acknowledge, right? I think to your point, let's just acknowledge the fact that we are dealing with an asymmetric situation or a misalignment. And I think that's about as close as we can get, isn't it?
Right now, at this stage in our life, me being in my now early 50s and you around the corner to them,
Coming right up.
we are at a stage in life where all of our peer groups are roughly at the same age. And I know this applies to folks listening, so I'm going to be sensitive when I say this. This is that era where everybody starts to second guess their marriages, right? Just fundamentally, the kids are of a certain age, the marriages of a certain age, where everyone's like, shit, is this it? And I have conversations with all of my friends around this. And Ryan, I've got a massive friend group, or a massive friend group. I know you have a huge friend group too. And I got to tell you, all the couples that Sarah and I know, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of couples, we can't name 3 that are happy, that are aligned, right?
That's a pity.
That's fucked up. Okay.
Yeah.
However, it also goes to point to how hard this is, right? I think in the early days, we go into this being like, well, I want to be rich. You want to be rich, blah, blah. Like we're aligned, right? Like, as if that's the end of it, right?
Again, man. But look, think about it though. Like just go to a pure mathematical state, right? At the origin point, everything's aligned. It's the second you start to move further that's when the lines, they can't diverge until that. When we're at 0, everyone's aligned, right? It's easy. It's of course we are.
When I was a little kid, I would walk up to another little kid, doesn't matter where we were, and I'm like, I like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. He's like, I like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Let's be best friends. Let's be best friends. That was it.
Was there another way to meet children between 1986 and 1990?
No, and just like
I didn't use one.
I watch it with my son now. It's the exact same thing, right? He's like, I like Fortnite. Is the other kid's like, I like Fortnite. We're best friends, right?
Yep.
So the point is, to your point, we get this origin. We're both on the same page, but we haven't introduced any of the factors. But I think what happens is because we fail to realize those really important nuances, we don't acknowledge them, which I think is important for all these categories we're talking about. I think acknowledging it is by far the biggest part. And I would say one part of that is acknowledging it to yourself and being okay. Like, because a lot of people will be like, oh, well, that person doesn't work as hard as I do, so fuck them. Like, no, dude, like that's the broken premise. That's why you're never going to make this work, right? The second part about it is communicating that acknowledgement to them. Hey, I understand why you don't work on Saturday. Honestly, I have to do it because my consequences are higher. You don't.
Yep.
But if you would, you'd be doing me a huge favor. That is way different than why aren't you working on Saturday? You create the acknowledgement. Same thing with my wife. Hey, I think we should go risk our personal money as a family on investing in this initiative. But I know that there's a lot of places we could put that money. This is probably a riskier one that I feel good about that makes no sense to you. So I'll understand if you're hesitant. It's not an affront to me. It's because your risk tolerance, your needs, your outcomes are different than mine. So there's no version where I can come to you and say, what's wrong with you? I should already know that going in.
Yeah.
If I've got any level of empathy.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think sometimes there truly are times where we're just looking at the same problem differently. But I feel like with this malalignment or this asymmetry, that it's not just that we're looking at the same problem differently. We're actually looking at different problems, right? We have the same circumstances, but we're actually looking at different problems, meaning that the outcome that they're most concerned about on the other side of this thing is different than what we're looking at, right? So the problem being a conduit to whatever that transformation, whatever the future looks like, that's where the difference is. And I think that's, for me, it was a hard recognition to have. Like I had to all of a sudden understand and acknowledge that. It's like there are times where when co-founders, employees, staff, friends, wife, children, it wasn't that we were looking at the problem differently. It was that we were literally looking at different problems. Like we were just fundamentally wanting to go and do different things from this new origin point.
Yeah,
whatever the problem is now, all of a sudden we're diverging there. That's something you just kind of have to respect. There's not much way around that, right?
Well,
short of trying to just literally realign people to make them you, which
that's what I'm saying, right? Like I went through probably the first decade of my career frustrated that everyone wasn't on my plan. And so I kept trying to like force feed all of these people into my version of how I thought things should go, and then being continually frustrated every single time that they weren't going my way. And that's not the same as saying, well, then I just defer to everybody every time. That's not the same thing.
Sure.
But if you were to say, hey, my way or the highway, that ends poorly. Yes, you can force enough things, but eventually that will break.
For sure. Yeah, because if you manufacture alignments, you somehow cobble it together,
Right.
it's gonna bend back out of shape, right? The type of alignment will fade. The thing I like, empathy lasts. We know this. So if you can't
It's a good point.
always share the same goals, at least share the understanding, right, of those differences. Then I think you've got something you can build from at that point.
I always say you cannot change people. You can only change your understanding of people. And
Yep.
so I'm not going to change my wife to be this risk-taking maverick, right? It's just not going to happen, right? And by the way, who the hell am I to even suggest that she should change?
Right. Why that could actually go perfectly horribly for
Yeah,
you, right? For all we know. Right?
might
That could
be
just
my
be
only control
absolutely
valve.
bad.
But I can change my understanding by saying, hey, this is what makes my wife tick. These are the things that concern her. These are the things that excite her, right? Like, and understand that when I bring to the table shit that concerns her, I shouldn't expect a high five answer, right? I should
Right.
expect a pushback because that's who she is. Conversely, when she has a conversation with me, she should know that my answer is going to be, fuck it, risk it all. Like, let's see what happens, right?
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, right. Let's see what happens because I'm okay with that. Because I'm
Yeah.
okay with what happens on the other side of us. See what happens because I always figure it out. But again, I think what's killed me for a long time. I get it now, which is why we're talking about this now. What killed me for a long time was one, not acknowledging myself, and the second, I wasn't good. I am now. I wasn't good at saying, I understand where you're coming from.
Uh-huh.
Right. I
Yeah.
understand why what I'm asking is antithetical to how you're built, and I recognize that. I would say my batting average for people giving me the same consideration is almost 0.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it work the other way too well. I haven't had an employee come to me and say, "You know, Will, I understand that your consequences are pretty significant and mine really aren't that high. So I'm going to work a little bit harder just to help you out." I've pretty much heard that never.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard that one. I don't think I've heard that one.
Mm,
No, but look, that goes back to understanding and acknowledging and respecting that difference. There's a reason they're not saying that to you, right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a fundamental, there's not a reason for them to say that to you, I guess is a different way
Great
to
way to
put
put
it.
it. Great way to put it. And
Yeah.
so
I think that, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like, I used to think that like with alignment, it was I just needed to convince everyone that my way was the way to go, and not being
Yep.
like a jerk about it, but just like
Yep.
I thought that was my job was to convince like the team that this was the future path to work really
Yep.
hard, all these things, and I realized just a little bit of it is, but like 10%,
Right.
right? Like enough to say, hey, just by the way, here's the direction I'd like to go. The other 90% of like making them do it because I wanted them to
Yeah.
never went well. Like it
No.
I don't know how people
No,
think that
I
works
think we
well.
have to stop. You just have to, at some point, you just have to stop trying to erase or correct the misalignment. I think now asymmetry is literally architected into a founder's life. Like what we are trying to do
Yes,
by
right,
its nature is asymmetric, right? We're trying to take something that's nothing and make it into something huge, right? Asymmetry at its best, right? We're going to
right.
just absolutely try to scale something. I think the real trick is not letting it break relationships as we go, because I think that perfect alignment is it's a myth, right? I don't think it's something we even can force function. Even if we
Absolutely
try
not.
really hard, I think we'll break ourselves doing it. Mutual respect, like that's always in style, right?
Right,
That's how you
right.
keep building to the point where you do reach alignment. Because again, it's really easy to be aligned in the good times, right? So
Right.
you gotta get there.
No one's ever had a huge problem because we're making so much money and we just don't know where to put it, right? And
Right.
if you
You're like,
do,
no, in the brown bags,
yeah,
no, in
yeah,
the
yeah.
green bags. Yeah.
Happy to, oh, you know what's so funny? This just reminds me of the dumbest story. Ponzi. I can't remember the guy's first name, but like Jeffrey or something like that. Ponzi actually had this problem. The Ponzi scheme comes from a guy named last name Ponzi. And as the myth goes, there was a time that Ponzi was making so much money that his issue was he couldn't figure out where to put it because he couldn't put it in a bank. So he was like
Yep.
stacking it in apartments or something like that. Like
Yeah.
that
Getting
was
eaten by
amazing.
rats and all that. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that
so
was
I
Escobar,
suppose in
right? Yeah.
extreme cases, it could also cause fighting. But I guess the point, you have so much money, you don't know where to put it, and the rats are eating it. You're probably not fighting
Yeah,
about money
yeah, you're
either,
gonna be okay.
anyways.
You're gonna be okay. So here's what I'd say. Like for all of us that are trying to like fight this battle, the way to win this battle is to fight it less. The way to win this battle is to zoom out and say, here are the things that I can control, way less than any of us think it is, and here's the things I can't control. The reality is, you can
Yeah.
control your own perception. You can't control other people. So if we want alignment, alignment has to come from our understanding of what can be controlled and by way of that, what can be compromised and what can't. And the sooner we get to that point, the sooner we kind of like take our hands off the wheel for a second. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to get everything I wanted of everyone. So I want to get as much as I can out of everyone. That will be the only thing that we'll ever get that will get even close to a perfect alignment.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.